Hello everyone, this video follows up our previous video on learning to play Pax Renaissance 2, and I just wanted to take the chance to illustrate how many of the rules of this game that may seem a bit difficult to remember are in fact very closely tied to the game theme. This makes them, for me, easier to remind. So I would like to start from the macroscopic level, from the trade routes, from the trade fairs. So if you run a trade fair on, let's say, on the west, you start deploying money around the western route. After you have deployed money, you see where you stop and you raise levies across the route on each state that the route went through. So why is that? Did you ask yourself, what does that represent? So that represents the fact that kingdoms used trade in this period. They were using trade to earn money through taxation. So kings and lords, they had their peasants, but the taxation they got from their peasants was just in terms of raw materials. So they got food, wood, leather from them, not much really in terms of coins. They got coins by taxing trade, international trade, by placing their agents and their inspectors on trade ports, and that made it easier to inspect each ship that was loading or unloading and to levy their custom charges, custom duties on them. So that was the main source of currency, and the kings used that money in part to pay the few agents and administrators, in part to buy exotic goods for themselves, but mostly to fund armies and wars. That's why whenever we run a trade fair, we levy new troops. So this represents the custom duties raised by the kingdoms they used for funding more armies, paying for weapons, for salaries, and for mercenaries. The kingdoms spent so much money on their armies that often they didn't have enough, and they have to borrow monies from the large merchant families, and often they draw themselves in tremendous debt. And this is represented nicely by the campaign action. So if I want to run a campaign, if I control the Ottoman Empire and I want to run a campaign, I have to pay 1 coin for each attacker, for each knight. And this exactly represents the fact the merchant is lending money to the king so that the king can fund their war. So in this case we are happy to lend this money. Some other cases the merchants were forced to do so by their king. So the question is, what do we get? Do we get this money back from the kings if this is an act of lending? In many cases they didn't. The king was unable to repay them, so the king defaulted, and the merchants found themselves without their payment. Many merchants of the period went bankrupt because of lendings to kingdoms that were not being able to pay it back. But in our particular case, we are paid back by placing a concession. This is what you usually do. If you win a campaign, you take over a kingdom and you can place a concession about that. That was very often done by kings as a way to raise money. If they needed cash quickly, they sold off the rights to trade to some merchant company, and this is why they are called concessions. In the Middle Ages, the people didn't have any rights. There wasn't a right to trade. If you were able to trade, it was because the king was either giving you a charter or a permission or their protection. A second interesting set of rules that I wanted to go through are the rules for conspiracy and peasant revolts. They may be difficult. It may be difficult to remind for conspiracy and peasant revolts who are exactly the attackers And who are the defenders? Well, no, the defenders are always the same, are the tokens here, the army tokens on the card. But for the conspiracy, you also count as attackers the armies that are repressed on the card. Why is that? Because repressed armies basically represent disgruntled nobles that are out of favor with the king because perhaps they supported the previous king or they had different ideas. So they are very happy to throw their lot into a conspiracy against the current ruler and perhaps to get back into positions of power. On the other hand, during a peasant revolt, the attackers are the repressed pawns. So think of the repressed pawns as merchants or traders that find themselves stripped of their prerogatives and brought back into the condition of peasants. They will be very happy to take part in any peasant revolt that you want to instigate on a kingdom, even peasants that do not belong to you, so pawns of different colors. The last rule I wanted to go through is the apostasy rule. The apostasy represents the fact that religious was very important in this period, and especially belonging to a particular religious set. If you, as a merchant or anybody else, were considered to be dealing with people, with important representatives of people of different religions, that could have been considered as a betrayal of your faith from your religious leaders. This is what the apostasy represents. So if you are dealing both with people, this particular example, with representatives of the Reformed Christian religion, a representative of Islam, you are going to get in trouble with either one or the other religion. Do you have any questions on any of the cards that you don't know how to they fit in the theme? So the role of bishops, this may be curious about. Why do the bishops silence the cards and stop for the cards' abilities to activate? This is because the religious authorities had a very strong power in the period, but they had a power to limitate what other people were trying to do. They were able to, for example, stop a work to be published or stop a war in some cases if they didn't consider that to be in line with their own expectations. And of course, if two bishops end up being on the same card, even two bishops of the same color, they destroy each other. That represents the fact that if they have two very strong authorities that they both want to have a strong hold on the populace, they will conflict with each other in such a way as to not being able to achieve anything, basically. Something else that I like on the game is the fact that at the beginning, talking in terms of trade routes, all the trade is focused on the eastern part of the map. The eastern trade route doesn't go through the west at all. It starts from Byzantium and goes directly to Mamluk, and this represents the Silk Road. It was the main trading route of the time. It was monopolized by kingdoms on the middle eastern section of the map. The fact that trade can shift later in the game, most notably to the Spice Islands, represent the discovery of the route to the east around Africa by the Portuguese. And this shifted money, trade, to the west from the east. Do you have anything else that you are curious about? Any rule that sounds strange to you that may be explained by?
Oh yeah, why is papal state such a weak place?
That's a very good question. The papal state is the only country that has a single token, and this is not by chance, but that represents the fact that Italy was never a country on this period, but it was different parts of Italy were subjected to the influence or the control of other countries during Middle Age. Spain, the Byzantium, the Holy Roman Empire, France, all of them different times had an influence or a direct control over different parts of Italy. The only part that largely remained independent was the papal state, thanks to the authority of the Pope in the middle of Italy.
And I also have another question.
Yes.
Why are there only some cards that there's only cards that allow papal states to have an extra horse there? Why is that?
Yes, that's interesting. I think I have one of those cards here, or at least I thought I had. This one here. No, this one. Condottiere. Venice can hold 2 gold knights instead of 1. This represents the fact that Italy, in part because it was such a torn country where there were many wars waged by different neighboring powers, developed a reputation of enricing mercenary armies and leaders. They were the condottieri, the leaders of mercenary armies that were recruited by the other European powers and used against each other. This sort of ability, many cards share this sort of abilities, represent the military expertise that can be found in Italy. So it allows you to deploy an extra knight, and this represents having access to condottieri, mercenary armies that you can use to attack anybody else. Any other question?
Not really.
I think we went through everything. The repress ability, this is also funny. The repress ability allows you to repress any one token represented by the ability. This is different among different cards. This allows you to repress a pawn and to grab 1 coin. This represents the fact that very often kings were not about seizing money, seizing properties, everything from a noble or a merchant with any pretext, just in order to fatten their purse, I would say. And that was it. I don't have anything else in mind. I hope this little bit of historic context will help you with remembering some of the Pax Renaissance rules. Thank you everybody. Bye bye.